if you've got an infection, a cold, a flu, bronchitis, or COVID, whatever it might be, you'll find that you likely recover quicker from it with the use of enemas too.
G'day everyone and welcome to the Rory Bland Show. G'day Gut Gang. In this week's episode we've got Helen Padarin, who is a naturopath who's been practicing for 20 plus years. She has an incredible wealth of knowledge around the gut healing and all that jazz. This episode is about coffee enemas in particular. You know, coffee enemas, it's when you put coffee up your butt, drinking coffee the other way to detox and heal your body. And hold on. I know it sounds full on, but it is a very powerful method for detoxification and supporting with gut health in the body. Helen goes into it in depth, so, she clears all those concerns. But that's what coffee enemas are all about. That was the intention for the episode, but we actually started diving into her work and her experience working with autism as well, because I thought that was really fascinating and I thought it'd be really cool to open that up. So the first half is all sorts of really interesting topics that we dive into. Second half is coffee enemas. And this episode is brought to you by Helen's Coffee Enema course. Everything you need to know about doing coffee enemas effectively, essentially the course that I wish I knew about when I was doing coffee enemas. I really do wish I knew about this because it's fantastic. Link is in the description, okay? So go check that out down below and enjoy coffee the other way. This video is also sponsored by Well Belly Health's mycotoxin mold-free coffee. So this is the stuff that I use in my coffee enemas, and we talk about it actually in this video as well. So you can get that stuff linked down in the description as well. It is the best coffee to use. You don't want to use your average coffee, Nescafe, instant coffee. You got to use the creme de la creme. And that's this stuff. Anyway, we talk about it in the episode. Catch you there. All right. Welcome, Helen. I'm so excited about this incredible chat we're going to have today. One of my favorite topics. We're diving into coffee enemas. How are you doing, firstly?
Oh, I'm doing great. I started off my morning with my coffee the other way, so it's always a good way to start the day.
Perfect. My favorite way to have coffee these days.
Totally.
So can you tell people who you are, what you do, and then let's just jump into this really interesting chat.
Yeah, so who am I? It's always a good question, right? I'm a naturopath and a nutritionist. I've been in clinical practice for 22 years now. And so, have evolved and learned many things over the years through working with literally thousands of people. So I initially started my practice with quite a strong focus on kids with autism spectrum disorders. I was working for 20 years with a pediatric specialist who specialized in autism treatment. So we worked closely together. And it was really working with those kids that taught me, so much more than what I learned in college and my degree, and that really helped me to help everybody else in a lot more effective ways. And one of the things that really came out of that experience was really delving into the whole gut health side of things and the link between the gut, the immune system, and the brain. Because, 9 out of 10 kids with autism have some degree of gastrointestinal distress disorder going on. And so that took me down this big path of, Western A. Price and the GAPS diet and the body ecology diet. And then before even knowing that it was called the paleo diet, just kind of by accident, paleo. And then, iterations of that over the years and looking at what kind of things tend to work best for most people most of the time in certain situations. So that's me on the work front anyway.
Wow. There's so much depth to your experience as a practitioner now from everything you've shared, and especially in the gut health thing. I think a lot of people, I don't know about everyone, but I know that people like yourself, that are really interested, go down this rabbit hole of gut health and find themselves in all sorts of nooks and crannies. So there's so much that I'd love to talk to you about and all that, because as we know, the gut is a little bit important in terms of treating for our overall health. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so are you working with clients now as well? Or are you just doing online stuff? What's your kind of day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so I'm practicing a couple of days a week. I wound that back a lot out of reaching a point of burnout, basically. I really love working one-on-one with people because you do really get to do a deep dive. And both, you know, in my professional life and my personal life, I'm not a paddle on the surface kind of person. I do like to dive in deep. And so that is really beautiful work. But I was also finding myself getting frustrated that you can only work with one person at a time, you know, and there's so many people now that need more help. And so opening up what I do over the years to do more group work as well has really provided a lot more opportunity to reach more people and to create community so that people can heal together as well, because I'm a big believer we're not meant to heal in isolation, we're meant to heal together. And, you know, I mean, this brings up so many different things, not just about physical health, but also about, you know, cultural and societal health at the moment and where we're all at and all the things that are at play. And it's, I like to bring, you know, the physical into it, obviously, but also looking at the psychological and emotional, because I find in the health world, there can either be people and practitioners who really focus on just the physical, and it's all about what you eat and how you live your lifestyle and biohacking and all of that kind of stuff, which is fantastic and amazing and important. However, then there's this other camp of people who can just be looking at all the energy work and all the trauma healing and all the, you know, psycho-emotional kind of work, but they're eating this really inflammatory diet and then, you know, still depressed or something, you know. So my big passion is actually bringing all of that together. And so I do a lot of that personal work myself. Have done training in trauma therapy as well. So yeah, I like to bring it all together.
Love that. Such a great approach. That's kind of the boat that I'm in as well, having been on both sides of the spectrum and to the extremes where like exclusively physical and then exclusively like, no, I'll just work on my emotions or just, you know, do all this emotional releasing, meanwhile still having, you know, stuff that wasn't good for my body. And then you do both of them and it just unlocks something new. So I'm glad that you've got that approach. And I think that, I don't know, some people are starting to coin onto it, you know, it's starting to get a bit more airtime, hopefully. I mean, maybe it's just our circles.
Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes, isn't it?
Right, fully. I know, especially, yeah, when everything on your feed is just like homesteading, meat, you know, regenerative farming, gut health, nervous system. You're like, oh yeah, everyone's into this. No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
Then the comments indicate otherwise.
Yeah, I've had to check myself quite a lot over the years to go, you know, I don't really have anything to offer anymore because everybody's just all over it. You know, everyone's talking about it, everyone knows it. And then you go outside that bubble and you're like, okay, we still got some work to do, people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I love what you're doing. I've been a fan for years, you know, following your journey, all sorts. We've kind of been around, you know, kind of hovering around a bit. So it's very cool that we connect in this way. And yeah, I'm stoked about all the things that we're going to chat about. Before we jump into the coffee enema stuff as well, I'd actually love to for you to chat about like the earlier work that you were doing with the autism and working with kids around that, because I find that to be really fascinating. And someone like I'm definitely like, I haven't been diagnosed with everything, but I'm definitely on some kind of spectrum of sorts. It's very clear to me, and the way that my life has unfolded and all the things as a kid. So and being on the GAPS diet, looking into this diet heavily, like I'm very interested in neurodiversity, healing that through the gut, and also just understanding that world. But I get a lot of comments because when people see the front of the GAPS book, I can't show it because my camera's propped up on it right now, but it says autism on the front, natural treatment for autism, ADHD, and then just by me showing up the front of the book cover, I haven't mentioned autism or ADHD, I think, at all in my content. People are like, this is not something that you try and heal, you know, this and that. And people just get sent off like a rocket. So I'd be curious to hear like your perspective around like perhaps even answering to these people of, well, we're not trying to heal autism. There's nothing wrong with it, but like maybe what's behind that reducing the symptoms, more livability or something like that. Just curious to hear your perspective on that, having worked so closely with it.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think in some degree we're all on the spectrum. You know, it's a big spectrum. And the crux of it is, I guess, how many confounding factors are present that create more severe symptoms or more difficulty with day-to-day life. And yeah, I've heard the argument many times, as you can imagine, over the years that, you know, there's stop trying to fix them. You know, there's nothing wrong with them. And it's like, sure, there's nothing wrong with them, but they're also not necessarily physically or emotionally well. And we know, as we've just been speaking about, the two are related. And if someone was neurotypical and they had the symptoms that a child with autism had, you would treat it, you know? Like if someone was neurotypical and they had green mucousy diarrhea all the time, you wouldn't go, oh, it's, you know, it's normal, we just put up with it. Whereas that's often what parents of kids with autism are told, that's just part of having autism, you don't need to do anything about it. So that's on the physical front, right? Then we know from a neurological perspective, well, there's actually been quite a push to change the description or diagnosis of autism because, you know, once upon a time it was purely seen to be a psychiatric disorder, which, knowing what we know now, just seems absolutely nuts, no pun intended. So with autism, what we're really seeing is that it is really more a multi-system dysfunction that has neurological symptoms. And so a way to break it down, I guess, is that almost anybody can relate to having either, you know, having bad guts in some way at some point, whether you've eaten something bad, whether you've had gastro, whether you've been constipated, whatever it is, you know, when you are physically uncomfortable in that way, you don't feel great in your mind or your moods, right? You have brain fog, you can't think straight, you're literally shittier, you know, like it has a direct impact on how our neurology functions. And so to label a child with a condition and then just go, well, that's just part of it, and not support them to thrive, to me, that's really unfair for the child and the family, because it's a huge stress for the child being so often, for example, you know, there's as many different types of autism as there are people who have autism. So I would just say that first of all, it's not the same for everybody. But things like sensory overwhelm are very common. And that is not a fun world to be living in. Anybody who's a highly sensitive person even can understand how challenging that can be at times. But imagine when you're so sensitive that noises like literally create physical sensations of discomfort or pain in your body. Like that's not a pleasant space to be living in, particularly if you don't have to, if there's an option of how you can start to be able to process those senses a bit more effectively so that you can live a more comfortable and enjoyable life and everything is not a stress and a battle all the time. And so it has a huge impact on the individual. It also has a huge impact on the family unit, on siblings, because a lot of the attention, understandably and, you know, rightly so, is going towards a child with special needs. It's necessary. However, that has lifelong impacts on siblings, and we also know that parents of children with special needs have an 80% divorce rate as well. So it just creates a mammoth amount of stress in the family unit. And one of the things that I have loved in working with these families is that not only do you see the child thrive, but you see the family thrive as well. And that is like the best thing.
Incredible explanation. Thank you. That is for you, user 291340000 with a no profile picture. It's it's so true, right? Like my son, he's very sensitive to foods, similar to myself. Like I get sensory overload quite a lot, and like since eating this way, gaps, predominantly carnivore, like the symptoms have gone down the least that I've ever had in my life, which has been tremendous. But where to the point where I had to go to a football game, right? I'm a 33-year-old man, and I went to a football game. I had to wear autism headphones, whatever mum called them, right? Because everything was too overwhelming and I needed to be there with my family. Eventually I adjusted and that sort of thing. But it's like, I don't think people realize how these little symptoms or these experiences can affect your day-to-day life. And even like breathing noises, or like I'm going to bed, next to my son because we co-sleep. It's like certain noises would just set me off, and it's like, it shouldn't, right? But even looking at him, like he's got a dairy and gluten sensitivity. And we were like, okay, well, let's just see how he goes with yogurt and just let him go with there. But he was having lots of yogurt every day. That was the only thing that was different in his diet, was lots of yogurt. And then everything, the world was too much for him for like a week straight. Like it was intense. And it's like, where's our boy gone? Right? It's like, and it got me thinking, okay, parents live with this daily. This is not just like a, let's take dairy out and we've got our son back, which is what happened, right? We removed dairy, gluten again. He was fine within 2 days, had a kinesiology session as well. It's like, okay, cool, back to normal. But this is every day for people. And so imagine, imagine not having your child scream at you for really no apparent reason to us. And then they're just chill. The impact that could make, I'm just speaking from my personal experience,
Yeah,
but
no, it's
I'm
black and
completely with
white.
you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we've there's so many things that are coming up here around resiliency, the gut immune link, but also as a culture, how we have come to accept a high degree of dysfunction as being normal. And we're so, generally speaking, culturally disconnected from ourselves and from our birthright of thriving and actually being in a state of health. We don't even know what that is anymore. And I mean, to a degree, I was that person too, right? Like, despite my parents' best efforts, I had very loving parents. I was almost born 3 months too early. So, mum was dosed up on Ventolin basically to stop the labor, which was great, saved my life, because at that point back then probably wouldn't have survived, right? And but it did have consequences as well. So you could see from my history that would have really disrupted both of our microbiomes. From a few months old, I had asthma and eczema. I had really severe allergies all through my childhood and teenage years. I would get regular tonsillitis, bronchitis, even had pneumonia when I was in year 9, shingles when I was in year 11. Like, my immune system was inflamed. My skin wasn't too bad, but I would get some breakouts sometimes. And in my teens, I also got really, really depressed. But I didn't know, like, I didn't have any aspiration to feel healthier because that was all normal for me. I didn't know that there was any different thing to feel, until for some reason I had a natural inclination towards healthier things. I loved being outdoors. I loved being active. I did enjoy eating well. I think it was just a bit of an intuitive thing. Don't get me wrong, I still ate a lot of junk when I was a kid as well. But as I started studying as soon as I left year 12, naturopathy and nutrition. Then I started learning more. And then it was even when I really started seeing patients that they were coming to me, even though I had studied all this stuff, studied symptomatology and pathology and diagnosis. And ironically, half the time when you're studying these things, you're like, oh my God, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. All that kind of stuff happens, right? You think you've got everything you're studying. But somehow there was a switch that didn't flick until I started seeing patients, and they were coming to me to address these symptoms that they had. And as they're telling me their symptoms, I'm just 21 years old at this time, I'm like, oh, well, I've got that too. Like, but I never thought to do anything about it because that's just been normal for me, you know? So it took that extraordinarily long period of time for me to actually go, okay, that's not normal. I want to do something about that. And then when I did, to feel better and go, oh my God, I can't believe I felt like that for so long. And that was normal to me. And I see that now with kids and adults, and it breaks my heart, particularly I guess with teenagers, because teenagers are it's the trickiest time to work with people around health, because it's a time of pushing boundaries and exploring and rebelling and all of that kind of stuff. But there's often as well, when you're a teenager, you think you know as well, like you're not quite an adult, but you're not yet a child, but you think you're an adult and you think you know. And there's these kids or teens who I've worked with, and it's like, they're like, oh, I don't care, I'm fine. I'm like, oh my gosh, but I know that you could just feel so much better, and you would get so much more out of life. You'd enjoy life so much more. And so it's just, got to kind of drop some carrot sticks and seeds that are enticing enough around something that they care about at that age, so that they can get a little, oh, okay, I see the difference, and then the journey continues. Yeah.
It's very true. I've seen, I mean, like, I had health issues as a teenager and growing up my whole life, and you just think, okay, you just live with it, right? You're like, oh, this is normal. It's normal to have joint pain after you eat grains. No worries. Like, it's normal for this or that, or it's normal to have acne, or or it's normal to have sensory overload or whatever, and you just don't think it's an issue. But then, it's not until you learn, like you said, that aha moment. It's like, oh wow, I can do something about it. But I think also the world tells us it's okay and normal to have these things. Like, in my comments one day, I think two people were arguing, which I love when people argue in my comments because it just sends the video to more people. It's great. Right. I'm sure you've had the same. And then someone was saying, yeah, well, it's not normal to have these niggles and pains. It's not normal to have joint pain. It's not normal to have these things. So, but we're conditioned and we're told that it's okay, especially, like, I don't know what percentage it is, maybe you might know, but like 70% of Americans are overweight, which would indicate to me that there's probably like 3/4 of our planet that have some sort of health issue. And because everyone has a health issue, it's all like, oh, it is what it is, and you just plod along, right? It's just, I think it's a horrible mindset, but we're just so programmed. So I'm hoping that bit by bit we can unravel this, but probably doesn't usually happen until it's kind of too late, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, often, we don't necessarily listen to the whispers, and we have to wait till we're hit by a freight train to do something about creating change. But I guess, and this is maybe where some of the resilience piece comes in as well, for everybody, literally everybody, but also particularly for kids or adults on the spectrum as well. Resiliency is so huge for both our physical and emotional and mental well-being. And it's something that is probably not particularly well fostered these days as well. There's a lot of lack of resiliency. But one area where we can really start to build resiliency is making sure that our physical home, our earth suit, is in really good condition. Because when that's in good nick and that's in good condition, when you do have mental and emotional stressors, they're easier to manage, and it's easier to regulate yourself amongst those stressors when the rest of your system isn't in chaos because it's physically inflamed. So it provides Yeah, and ironically, when we're stressed is often when people will start to eat more crap as well. And it's like, no, that's the most important time for you to eat well. And if you do, you really do notice the difference. Like, oh, that was a pretty intense time, but I got through it all right, you know? So, yeah, even if everybody takes one thing away from today, that would be massive because it impacts how we react and respond to literally everything, whether it's our relationships or our work or anything going on in life, hardships in life. It really, and our interactions with others, and whether we're going to be, you know, um, reactive, volatile, and aggressive, or be able to be more grounded, centered, and compassionate in how we communicate with one another.
I can vouch for that. I mean, that's bang on. I can vouch for that because me doing this, removing all these inflammatory foods, it changed almost every other area of my life. I was able to start handling my emotions, my nervous system, my business, my finances, my relationships. Everything started to unfold because I was doing that one thing right. It seems so small, but it was just completely life changing. And yeah, I can relate to this food stressor thing. I've noticed that recently because now, like, that I'm more aware of my body, and that's one thing that happens as you go through the health journey. You become more aware. Like those niggles that we're told that you mentioned before, you pay attention to them, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the train that has to hit you first, and then you're like, oh, I know these niggles would lead to a train. But for me, I was having honey at one point, recently, and I became like addicted basically, and I found that I turned to it because I was stressed, right? And because I turned to that for stress to not deal with the stress that was going on, and I didn't realize necessarily that that's what I was doing. I was doing it rather unconsciously. But then once I took the honey out, because then my candida flared up and it was horrible, then I took that out. Then the same stress that would come up, I would think about sugar. I was like, oh, I'm just going to maybe breathe. Probably that's a good place to start. Maybe cry
Yeah.
if I need to right now. Do
Yeah.
I need to cry? No, yes. And then, either do like, if I'm hungry, just have some meat or something like that, or like have some broth or a tea, but just something that's positive. And that's like that rewiring is underrated, but makes a
Totally.
huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes instead of that, sugar hit or caffeine hit or stimulant of some sort, sometimes we just need to go outside for 5 minutes and put our feet on the grass and have a little breather. And then be like, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm good to go again. Just a little reset. Because when we're chasing it from consuming, it often doesn't actually do the job. And then we just end up in a cycle of chasing the relief, and it's not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. I used to do the same with gaming, right? Like I'd have
Mm.
games on my phone or I'd have them on my computer, and that feeling that like it was unconscious at first, it was like, oh, and then all of a sudden I'm playing a game, right?
Yeah.
And it's that same thing. So taking those 5 minutes, I think it's
Yeah.
simple
I
enough.
just did a talk on this the other night for a medical centre down in Sydney for their patient group, all about this. It's like a whole nother topic of this, yeah, window of tolerance and our nervous system and how we respond, and being able to notice what are the cues, because often we don't actually realize that we're activated or stressed, but we can start to become aware of and identify the behaviors that tell us we are. And then we're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, now I can see that. All right, so what's a better choice that I could make now? Okay, I can do that. What did I actually need in this moment? Yeah. So that's a whole nother talk. Yeah, one of the things you mentioned before was about inflammation and anger, and I feel like that could be a really good thing to touch on now, though, because if you think about, there's a few aspects to this, but one is if you think about inflammation, it's heat and it's more movement, right? There's heightened activity of the immune system, and there's heat. And you think about anger. How do you know you feel angry? It's usually you feel a rush of energy, and you normally feel heat coming up as well. So it is no coincidence when people are in flames, they're more likely to be irritable and angry. Same if they've got liver issues going on, it tends to be seat of anger from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view. So, if someone's angry and irritable all the time, it's like, so how about doing a little liver support? Or often when you do some liver support, or, we do the liver and gallbladder flush online as a group, and often throughout that process, themes of anger and frustration will come up, and we celebrate that. We're like, awesome, it's moving, it's shifting through your body, you're not holding on to it anymore. So let's get that out too. So that's really important, again, link between what's going on physically and what's going on mentally and emotionally. And the other way that impacts us as well, and this is really obvious with kids with ADHD actually, is that, so we've got, as you know, most of our immune system, I'm sure, is in our gut, right? 80% of it is in the lining of the gut wall, give or take. We do, however, have more immune cells in our brain than we've got brain cells up there, okay? So when something is going on with our immune system, it activates it, called microglial cells. So it activates these microglial cells and they get hyperactive. When they get hyperactivated, they irritate, aggravate, activate our neurons as well. And then our neurons get hyper. And then we feel fidgety. We can't sit down. We can't think. We're like moving around all the time. Difficulty concentrating, and you'll see this really easily, as I said, with kids who have ADHD. There's a very high rate of kids who have ADHD who also have asthma and or eczema and or allergies, and that's that perfect example of that immune system is hyperactivated, which is creating this activation of the microglial cells in the brain. And then you get this hyperactive neurological response. That's one of the pathways. There's multiple pathways, but that's one of the most direct ones.
Can you put everything that's in your brain onto this chip for me so I can just download it all? That's so fascinating.
I'm sure one day you'll be able to just ask Elon Musk. Yeah.
I don't know about that. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Gosh, so much to talk about. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is we'll make a hard pivot over to the coffee enemas.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's the thing.
So, the thing that this was supposed to be about, but I was like, let's talk about that. I'm so glad we did, because there's so many little ahas that I had. I'm sure other people have had them as well. All right, cool. Now the topic that this was supposed to be all about, the coffee enemas. So before we jump into that world, because I wouldn't say an addict, but an aficionado, becoming a connoisseur. I'm addicted. I love it. But coffee enemas is something that I never thought I'd do, but I've always been open to different therapies, right? And I started doing them because it's kind of part of gut healing, the GAPS protocol, detoxification, everything like that. And the nutritionist, the GAPS practitioner I've been working with, Elise, she was like, you got to start those coffee enemas. I was like, I don't know about that. I was putting it off. And then when I had my first coffee enema, it was like the universe opened up. It was like, it would have been like taking, I don't know, DMT or something like that. Maybe not as intense as something like that, but it was just, my whole life changed instantly. And from that point on, I became hooked on the way that I felt. And I felt like it was doing some good for my body. And particularly the thing that got me hooked as well is not just that, I call it like post-enema, clarity, or, what I mean? But I was coming down with something, and my sinuses were like, they were flaring up hardcore. And this is like in the early stages of when I was doing this. So like my body was obviously going through some sort of healing process. I did the coffee enema. Literally everything was gone. I had the best sleep that I'd had probably ever. And I was breathing so well. It was like amazing. I'm like, what is going on? So I started diving into it. I started doing it for 30 days every day in a row. I was like, let's do it for 30 days, see what happens. So I just became so fascinated. And then eventually we connected around like coffee enemas and that sort of stuff. I'm like, yeah, baby, let's talk about this. So I don't know where you want to start. Like, that's my experience with coffee enemas. And, I'll
Yeah.
probably do one maybe once a week or once a fortnight now. I'm up to about 60, I think, that I've done this year. Love it. Absolutely love it. Can you, like, I don't know where you want to start with this. So
Yeah.
go wherever you want to start from.
Well, there's got to be some pun there about starting at the end, right? Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember when and how I first got into them. It was over a decade ago, and I remember I was in New Zealand at the time. But same kind of thing, when I'm bringing practices in like this for patients, I'm always practicing on myself first, right? So I had similar experience of um, it being quite a revelatory experience, yeah. And as you said, the clarity that comes, the energy that comes afterwards can be quite astounding. And it's quite different from drinking coffee. It's a different kind of clarity than you get from the buzz of drinking caffeine. Part of that is because you do absorb about only a third of the caffeine from an enema than you do from drinking coffee. So there's that. But yeah, we hold so much in our guts, right? We hold so much in our guts, and a lot of us, again, modern culture, modern diet, modern lifestyle, lots of sitting, all of the things, a lot of us have inflamed guts, or even if we're going every day, maybe not having a complete evacuation. So one of the signs of good poop is a complete evacuation, right? So you want a nice smiley log and not be able to see any food in there. You want it to be a good poo brown color, not any other shades. And you want it to feel like a complete evacuation. Everybody knows what a complete evacuation is like, because when you have one, you get that little endorphin hit at the end of your poo and you feel really good, right? And if you don't have a complete evacuation, you're like, it kind of feels like something's still there, or, you just don't get that rush. So a lot of people, certainly who I speak with in clinic anyway, have not been in the habit or experience of having those complete evacuations. So that tells us that there's a build-up of waste material in the intestines and in the bowel. And so what happens is when there's material sitting there, well, first of all, it's a great breeding ground for opportunistic microbes to come into dominance, to overgrow, for parasite infections, for things like that, for yeast infections to occur. Now, microbes, like all other living things on the planet, eat and poop, and some of their poop is really good for us, like they produce B vitamins and biotin and vitamin K and all sorts of things like that. But they also can produce poop that is not great for us, like lipopolysaccharides and different kinds of short chain fatty acids like propionic acid, which in a right amount is good and in a high amount can create symptoms of autism as well, by the way. So we really want to make sure that we've got this, good mix of microbes going on in the gut, because they're going to affect literally everything that's going on elsewhere in our body. And if we've got this impacted feces and old waste products just sitting in the bowel, what happens is compounds from that actually get reabsorbed into the bloodstream as well. So one of the most obvious examples of this is estrogen in women, particularly if there's any signs and symptoms of estrogen dominance. One of the issues is often incomplete emptying of the bowels, particularly if there's, overt constipation, but it doesn't even need to be obvious constipation. It could just be not a full emptying. And then estrogens from the feces get reabsorbed into the bloodstream and end up back in circulation. And then the liver's got to process the new estrogens that are being produced plus the old estrogens that are coming through as well. So it puts a lot of extra load on the liver. And so by flushing the bowels out, we're clearing all of this waste that is creating a whole number of different problems via these different mechanisms, right? So you can, however, do a flush out without doing a coffee enema, right? You can do colonics, you can do a salt water flush, you can do a water enema. All of those will achieve the flushing out part of it. The added bonus of a coffee enema is that the coffee has functional effect itself. So caffeic acids and other acids in the coffee get absorbed and go straight to the liver and stimulate our production of glutathione. And this is one reason why you would have noticed when you did your enema when you were all sinusy and stuffy that your sinuses cleared up as well, because glutathione, not only is it a really important antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecule, it's one of our most important immune molecules. We need it to fight infection. So generally speaking, with infection, coffee enemas are fantastic to aid in recovery, and certainly over the last few years with the new Big C, it has been really helpful, particularly in people who have had long COVID as well, or any, post-viral syndromes are nothing new. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue after severe flu infections and things like that. Long COVID has just had really good PR. There's a few differences with long COVID in that there's this whole spike protein thing, but the rest of it is very similar to other post-viral syndromes. And this is an area where I have found coffee enemas to be really helpful in recovery, because there's no double-blind clinical trials on this that have been done, obviously, but from our historical use of it and using it in other conditions and seeing the glutathione increases and knowing the effect of that on immune function, we can put two and two together. So it seems that is the mechanism of action there. So not only is it increasing your glutathione, which is important for detoxification, antioxidant activity, and immune function, it also stimulates the release of bile from the bile duct. Okay, so that helps with, bile is really important acid made by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and it's most common. It's most famous for breaking down fats as part of digestion, right? But it has other functions as well. Bile is also really important for maintaining a healthy microbial balance in the small intestine, along with strong stomach acid. They help keep the small intestinal microbial levels down low. So without enough stomach acid and bile acid, we can be more prone to SIBO and SIFO, so small intestinal bacterial or fungal overgrowth. That results in, bloating, gas, distension, abdominal pain, all of that kind of thing. And bile is also really important for detoxifying fat-soluble toxins in the body. You think of bile as a bit of a detergent, really, like you would use detergent to wipe grease off your dishes in the evening. You use bile to help dissolve, emulsify toxins that are stored in fats in the body. So if you're doing any fat-soluble detox protocols, whether, again, it's an estrogen dominant situation, or whether you're dealing with mold mycotoxins, or whether you've had some exposure to environmental toxins such as phthalates or some PFAS chemicals or agricultural chemicals, that kind of thing, a lot of those are fat soluble. And so in parts of fat soluble detox protocols, the coffee enemas really help to speed up that detox process as well. Then the other thing is, when you're doing parasite protocols, a lot of people are just looking at restoring the environment of the gut. Well, actually, a lot of people aren't even looking at restoring the environment of the gut. A lot of people are just going in and trying to kill off and wipe out parasites without actually changing the environment. Whenever we're doing any gut work to resolve microbial levels, we basically want to do renovations of the gut, right? We think about it as real estate. And when you've got rundown real estate that needs a bit of attention, you're kind of going to get the riffraff in terms of tenants, right? And so if you want to get the tenants out, you want to, well, as you're getting the tenants out, you also want to change, you want to do renovations, get a new paint job, do the kitchen, put new cupboards in, all of that kind of stuff. So you've got a nice piece of real estate and you can attract good tenants, good microbes to come and take up residence. And then, as anybody in real estate knows, if you've got really good tenants, they'll actually help to take care of the property as well, right? So when we're doing microbial protocols, we want to address the state of the environment of your gut. But unfortunately, that's also where a lot of protocols stop. And what we understand is that the gallbladder is actually a site of infestation for parasites. So you can clear up the gut and get that all in good nick. But if you don't clear out the gallbladder, then you can end up with just reinfecting yourself over and over. Okay? So gallbladder flush protocols and coffee enemas are really helpful in helping to really eradicate chronic parasite issues. There we are.
You guys taking notes here? You guys taking notes? This is fascinating. And it's funny, as you're talking about tenants and everything like that, I just visually see that in my head. There's such a great explanation. Far out. There's so much to unpack there. So I realized as well that we didn't even talk about what an enema is, at the start. It was like, because I'm in this bubble, right? And I'm like a, coffee enema club kind of guy now. It's like, I don't know if we go back to there and say, what is an enema?
Totally. What is an enema? That's a pretty important piece of information. Well, this is what I call having coffee the other way, right? So instead of via the mouth, an enema is via the anus. So enemas have been used in medicine for hundreds of years, thousands of years, in fact, if you look back at the literature or at historical writings and books. So, but yeah, still commonly used in medicine. Often they are used for dealing with impacted feces and severe and chronic constipation, but they can also be used to administer medications. And that's often done in hospital and hospice settings. So we do get great absorption of active compounds through the bowel wall, which is one reason why medications are administered that way. Suppositories is a similar method, I guess, in that sense, but it's not being inserted with any fluid, whereas an enema is always with fluid. So you're looking at taking in anywhere from a cup to up to 2 litres of fluid into the bowel. And then with a coffee enema, the aim is to retain the coffee in your bowel for up to 15 minutes before you release it. Now, depending on the person and their current state of health, it may be advisable to do a water enema before and or after the coffee enema. And doing a water enema beforehand and flushing out a lot of gunk that's there can make it a lot easier to hold the coffee enema. When you're doing water enemas, you don't need to hold it because you're not trying to absorb any active compounds from the water. It's literally just to flush it out. But with a coffee enema, the reason you want to retain it is because you want to have time to absorb some of those acids in the coffee that are going to elicit those medicinal benefits.
And can you just use any old instant Nescafe coffee for the coffee enema? Or?
Absolutely.
Just go down to the local coffee shop.
Yeah. No, definitely not no Nescafe. So you definitely want it to be organic coffee and you want it to be mold-free coffee. Yeah. So there's quite a few companies now that are doing organic mold-free coffee. Your practitioner and my dear friend Elise is one of them. She's got organic mold-free coffee beans available. Byron Bay Coffee Co. is another one. There's quite a few around the place. And I believe even the macro organic, I don't tend to support Woolies where I can, but it is a more affordable option as well. So particularly for enemas where you're not necessarily, it's not about the taste. the macro organic coffee can be a good option as well. Yeah.
It's super cool that it's becoming more of a popular thing, the mold-free, mycotoxin-free coffee, and I didn't realize. I think it wasn't until I came across Dave Asprey and him talking about mold and coffee, I was like, "Yo, that's kind of nuts." And then I actually I was like, "Yeah, but does it make a difference, right?" I always bring this skeptic mindset into everything I do, even though I'm
Which is
very
good.
alternative. You know, it's like I always, first and foremost, bring extreme skepticism to everything because I think it's healthy. Cool,
Yeah.
yes, same. So, with the coffee, I'd heard about that. I was like, okay, let's give it a crack. So, I used Elisa's incredible like mycotoxin mold-free coffee. Amazing, smells so good too. And then I used normal organic coffee, and because I ran out of the other stuff, and I notice a difference, right? Like I notice I'm more jittery. I don't feel as good afterwards. I even I just don't feel good. It feels like I feel off, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It just doesn't feel quite right. So
Right.
for me, I have noticed a difference doing coffee the other way, with, mold free coffee and normal organic fair trade coffee, so it's definitely made a difference for me.
Yeah, I was just going to say huge difference. And, it, first of all, doesn't make any sense when you're trying to detox to be using something that's adding more toxins. And unfortunately, mold mycotoxins in food have been overlooked for a long time because it's, I guess, not very convenient for the food industry. So, it does require that extra degree of care and discernment, both for companies who are providing the product and for consumers who are purchasing the product. But it is so worth it because we know that mold mycotoxins disrupt immune function. They are neurotoxic as well, so they really do affect the brain. They are responsible for a lot of the jittery feeling that people will feel from coffee. You can still, people have different caffeine tolerances as well. So people can still drink, if I drink mold free organic coffee, I'm still going to feel somewhat jittery. But having that is vastly different from having a regular coffee, even if it's just organic and not mold free. You notice the difference, as you said. So, yeah, disrupts immune function as well. So, yeah, it is really worthwhile sourcing good quality coffee for the purpose of drinking and also the other way, enemas.
Can you do decaf coffee enemas, or there's no point?
No, no. I mean, I've done one or two decaf enemas over time just because I felt like I wanted to do an enema and I had run out of caffeine coffee. But you really do need to do the caffeinated coffee for an enema because it is the caffeic acids that are eliciting the therapeutic response. So it needs to be the full strength. And for those who are concerned about caffeine sensitivity, who can't drink coffee, I have worked with so many people over the years who are so exquisitely sensitive to coffee, like they literally can't have a sip. They'll be having palpitations and feeling dizzy and faint-headed and all of that kind of stuff. But they've been fine with enemas. And with those people who are really caffeine sensitive, I've always started, recommended that they start on weak coffee enemas. So it could be that they use a teaspoon of coffee instead of 4 tablespoons, and then they'll gradually build up to a stronger enema as they feel comfortable and safe to do so, and they know they're not going to, be jittery and pass out, basically. So yeah, it has a very different physiological effect than drinking it.
So true. Noticeable. I mean, I love the smell and taste of coffee, and I haven't had it
Right.
for 8 months because the last time I had it, my skin broke out, right? So I was like, you know what? Anything that does that to my skin, no thank you. It'd be interesting to try the mycotoxin free stuff, but I almost just don't want to risk it now. It's but the having it the other way, like I feel It's almost like I get the benefits of coffee without the downside.
Totally. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you drink coffee, your skin flares up. You do a coffee enema, it clears up your skin. It's like,
Go figure. Go figure. The body
yeah.
is a weird, interesting thing.
Yeah, but I would say, and not everything is for everyone, but if you're curious and you don't have an active inflammatory bowel condition, definitely consider whether it would be a helpful practice. Speak with your practitioner about it as well. That's always important. But yeah, don't be scared of them though. They're incredibly powerful tools, and it's funny, in clinic, there's a few people who are like, oh yeah, cool, I'll do that straight away. And then there's other people who are like, you want me to put what, where? And, yeah, it's fun. You're going to love it. It's going to be so good. And afterwards you'll be like, why didn't I do that sooner? And invariably, sometimes it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. For some people, it's even been 6 months to get there. And then they've done it and then be like, oh, why did I not do that sooner? I'm like, I know. Particularly for guys, I think guys tend to have a bit more of a stigma around it than women do. But I haven't worked with anybody who has said, I wish I didn't do that. Haven't worked with anybody who's regretted it. And I've worked with a lot of people with coffee enemas over the last more than a decade since I've been doing them myself. Yeah, a lot of people. I've even had one woman's husband contact me, or send a message to me through his wife actually, of thank you, like you saved our marriage, because she was having such severe PMS every month, like severe fluctuations with hormones and just these big estrogen spikes. And so every month on trying to remember now for her whether it was ovulation or just premenstrually, but basically she'd be asking for a divorce every month and fiery, and just like life was actually really not even jokingly hard. It was like a full-on test for them personally. And then Enemas came in and he's like, oh, I have my wife back. Thank you. She's not asking for a divorce every month. And, so yeah, it's helpful for so many things. They're amazing for headaches and migraines, like fantastic for pain syndromes, for inflammation, for, as we mentioned before, mold mycotoxin detox, for estrogen detox. Yeah, so many different things that it's helpful for. Menstrual irregularity and heavy bleeding and that kind of thing is fantastic for. So yeah, there's so many benefits, so many benefits.
Holy moly! So who do you reckon then should give it a crack? Like out of the people, like what kind of things specifically do you think, or do you think it's just even if you're in good health, you can have it as well? Like you don't have to have serious problems like myself.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't have to have serious problems. So one thing I think is important to bear in mind is that no one is really living in our natural environment anymore, right? We're living in artificial environments under artificial lights, sometimes emitting like mercury from those energy saver globes, or whether it is what's being sprayed in the air or what's in the water, what's being sprayed on our food. We are just not in a natural environment. So people will say, you don't need to detox. Detox is unnecessary. The body does it on its own. And yes, the body does do it on its own on a regular basis, but the body has never had to deal with the burden it has to deal with these days. So I find that everybody tends to benefit from some focused detoxification and elimination support. So the detoxification is the removing it from your cells, the transforming of the molecules from one form to another so that it can actually be eliminated. And then we need to make sure our elimination pathways are open, our bowels, our kidneys, our lungs, our skin, our lymph, so that those things can be moved out of our body. So in that sense, and with everything going on in the world, yeah, most people can benefit from it. If you've got an infection, a cold, a flu, bronchitis, a COVID, whatever it might be, you'll find that you likely recover quicker from it with the use of enemas too. You don't want to use enemas if you've got a really inflamed bowel condition going on, if you've got Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or fissures or things like that happening. And this is where it's really important to, chat about it with your practitioner as well. But yeah, it's one reason why I created the coffee enema course. I don't know if it's a time to talk about it now, but
yeah, I'm literally like, go for it, jump into it, because I know that you built a course all about this stuff.
Yeah, so it's just a nice, simple, do in your own time course that really lays out, first of all, a bit of the history on it so that this isn't just some newfangled fad thing that people are jumping on the bandwagon of. It's got a lot of backing to it. But also the whys and the hows, so why it works, how it works, when you might want to use it. And then you have videos as well, because, humans, it's just part of our psychology. When something is really new or foreign to us, sometimes the fact that it is just foreign is the thing that stops us from doing it. So there's short videos in there that you can watch in like 5, I don't think there's anything even 10 minutes long, but 5 to 10 minute videos, so that you're not having to rewind and fast forward to find the bit you want to find either. It's just like, this is how you set it up, this is how you prepare it, this is how you do it, this is how you clean it, kind of thing. So video instructions of the whole thing to just fully demystify it and just normalize it, really. I mean, it should be as normal as doing a poo or a wee anyway, so yes, you can find all the information in the course, and it's got printouts as well, so and tips and hacks, and also other types of enemas that you can do with different herbs for different purposes, and how to make your enemas most effective, how to make sure you're hydrated, and all of that kind of stuff.
Cool. Guys, this is the course that I didn't know about it until I think I was like 2 months into my coffee enema journey, and I was still figuring stuff out. And there's great information online and stuff like that, but I wish that I would have jumped into something like this earlier. So if you are a newbie to enemas, or even if you're a seasoned, I don't know, 60 enemas, am I seasoned? Am I getting there? Or
60, I reckon you're doing well. Yeah.
Getting there. Yeah.
I reckon
so
you've probably figured out all your little hacks and tips to have the best enema experience.
Fully. Yeah, there's definitely, it's like a tweaking process, right? Like, those people, it's so funny. It's so funny. I never thought I'd be so into coffee enemas, but you think of those TikToks or those people that spend like $10,000 on all this coffee equipment, and then they like aerate it and they tickle it and I don't know what, all these sorts of things. It's like, I'm slowly got my own technique that I've found that works for me. I'm sure you've got your own.
Yeah,
it's so
totally
weird.
Yeah, you figure it out. And that's one of the things in the course as well. There's a whole list of, troubleshooting and hacks to, if you've got any questions, pretty much anything is going to be answered in there. So you're not going to be having to look at your things and figure out, what am I doing with what, and what do I do, what in, and but when I did it this time that happened, but when I did it this other time I had this other experience, so what was that about? And all of that will be in there, so that you can just go, okay, I know what I'm doing, and 6 coffee enemas in, you'll be an aficionado.
Join the coffee enema club. I'd love to open like a parody restaurant one day, and it'd be so funny. Just offer coffee enemas, be like, oh, we only do in enema bags or something like that.
Yeah. So how do you take your coffee? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Can you just chuck it in an enema bag for me, or to go. So there is so much more that we could talk about, but I think this is a good place to kind of keep people excited and hungry for more for Helen's world, because Helen's got so much great content all over her website, her channels. She's got incredible programs as well, not just around the gut health, but all sorts of things. Where can people find you, firstly? And then what are some things that you've got going on that you're excited about?
Okay, so 2 websites to check out. They are linked to each other. So even if you just go to helenpadarin.com, you'll find your way also to wellembodied.com.au. So Well Embodied is my clinic group, basically, where I've got other practitioners working with me. And we also run programs through Well Embodied. So we've got the Gallbladder Flush online program. We've got 9v9, which is a short 9-day challenge. We have the coffee enema course on there. We've got the kids immunity course on there, which is a fantastic course for just empowering the whole family through the winter months of the year. And then we are literally just about to launch a 5-month container as well to take people through a lot of the foundations of health and well-being, but from a perspective that, you know, is covering what you're used to hearing, I guess, in a way, around nutrition and sleep and all of that kind of thing, but in a lot greater detail and all intertwined with cycles, the cycles of ourselves and of nature. Because I think one of the things that has really happened over the last few years at a higher rate than it was previously is a lot of people have lost their anchors and their routines because more people are working from home and studying from home, and there's a bit of this sense of feeling rudderless and isolated. So this course is about creating community and also about reconnecting to the cycles of ourselves and the cycle of nature, and everything that we speak about will have all of that woven through, and it's going to be really cool. And that starts in July. So really looking forward to that. Yeah.
That's exciting. That's so exciting. I love everything you're doing. I've been a fan for years. It's so cool that we got to do this. And guys, go binge, watch, binge, buy, just engage with Helen's stuff because she's just got such a wealth of knowledge, you know. Like I said, I wish I could download her stuff onto a chip. Amazing. Thank you again. It's been awesome.
Such a pleasure. Yeah, as you said at the start, you know, we've been circling each other's orbits for so many years now, so it's nice to finally have a good chat.
Fully. Well, we haven't actually spoken before, have we?
I don't think so.
I don't think. Nah, it's weird, right? It's
Yeah,
weird because
I know.
through
I
social
feel
media,
like
you
we
feel
should.
like, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
weird. No,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Funny
Where
stuff
are you
that way.
based?
Byron.
Byron. Oh, sick. You're down the road. Oh,
Yeah, where
cool.
are you?
Brisbane.
Okay, yeah, not far away
Yeah,
at all.
nice. Oh, cool.
go.
Coffee and a
Neighbour.
catch up.
Yeah. Awesome. Normally do that on FaceTime, but sure.
Yeah.
As long as it's 2 bathrooms, we're good.
That's hilarious. You know what? You're a legend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode or watch it if you're on YouTube. It means the world to me. And there's plenty more where this came from as well. So if you'd like to see more content or listen to more podcast content, then you can just hit subscribe on YouTube. If you're on Spotify or iTunes or the other things, 5-star rating goes a very, very long way and would be forever grateful. For any of the resources and links mentioned, you can head over to rorybland.com and you can check out my exclusive newsletter at rorybland.com/newsletter. Thank you again, and I can't wait for you to check out the next one.